Hello again, welcome. When it comes to hard-hitting people, when it comes to honest people, I think we've got two of the best on this show this week. Two guys that have worked in football at the highest level, one of whom has written a book, which is one of the reasons why he's on here. We speak to Graham Bean anyway. Here we are, been there, done that. It's an extremely colourful journey into football, which interestingly he says he regrets. He's a former police detective. He is Graham Bean. Hello, Graham. Welcome to you.
Yeah, hello. How are you going?
Well, I'm going very, very well. And I think you are, now that you've got a distance from football. We'll pursue that as we go into the course of the conversation. The other guy joining it is actually one of your old adversaries, but I think there's a real mutual respect. I welcome my old friend, Keith Hackett, the former boss of England's referees. How are you doing, Keith?
I'm very well, thanks, Alan. Delighted to be on this show.
Good. Thank you very much for coming on again. And all the best to Penistone Church, of course, you're president of. Let's just kick off with, Keith, have you read this or have you looked at it?
I've not read it yet, no. I've not had time. I've been reading other people's books.
There's loads of them. I've got a stack of them.
Yes.
But let me tell you, you've mentioned. You're mentioned, but you're in good company because, Graham, that company includes Sir Alex Ferguson, who you came to know very well, Rafa Benitez, David Moyes. But you started off by being recruited by the FA as what the media termed as a sleazebuster. Actually, your title was compliance officer. How do you feel in retrospect that went?
Yeah, well, as I say in the book, at the time, it seemed that the FA was sort of looking to recruit someone of my experience with an investigative background. But the longer it went on, and now when I look back, it's clear that they were just paying lip service to the job that I was doing. And as I say in the book, at the time that I started, there was just myself and a secretary that helped me with the paperwork. Now that department has got over 40 people in it, so it gives indication that the FA now do actually take it somewhat more seriously than what they did back then. Which, as I say in the, clearly say in the book, when I look back, they were just paying lip service. And whilst I was sort of trying my best under sort of pressing circumstances, and I think that we got some decent sort of results as well. In the circumstances, I just think that had I been given the resources that the FA now have to deal with compliance, then we could have sort of made a better job of it.
So you achieved something. You feel you've achieved something for football.
Yeah, I think that sort of in those early days, it was all a new sort of new system. But the reality was that the FA had never sort of done things like use their powers of inquiry and invest in interview techniques with participants in the game. And I think I brought that, I started sort of that process off, sort of using their rules that they'd never used before. And that sort of led to sort of the investigations into Boston United and Chesterfield in relation to the financial irregularities that were going on there. So I think that in terms of actually sort of getting the ball rolling for compliance issues, then I think that we were sort of there right at the start. And but sort of I look back now and realise that they were paying lip service and maybe sort of I ruffled too many feathers to sort of maintain sort of the position that I was doing. And let's not forget, I talk in the book about an investigation into Hull City, which sort of uncovered a lot of sort of wrongdoing, and the FA, after I left, the FA just sort of threw it in the bin. They didn't do sort of anything at all about it. So, I think that sort of sums it up, quite frankly.
Yeah, something good came out of it for you because you made contacts within the game, some very influential contacts, and eventually that led to the gamekeeper, if you like, becoming the poacher, didn't it?
Yeah.
As you represented the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson and high-profile players and other managers against the FA.
Yeah, what happened was when I started working at the FA, as well as doing the investigation, I was a bit of a jack of all trades, because what I was doing was I was also prosecuting the disciplinary hearings. And I realised very, very early on that players and managers and clubs were going along to disciplinary hearings, and the representation that they were putting forward and the submissions they were putting forward, they weren't in any sort of structure. They were very, very sort of amateur to a certain extent. And I saw a niche sort of area for it. And that's why I sort of, when I left the FA, I sort of, it was an idea that I'd had sort of a number of years before, but I then sort of put it into action, and that led to the door of Sir Alex Ferguson and many others. You
got to know them well. Keith, of course, you got to know these big characters in the game well as well, from a totally different perspective. And I imagine that you had some pretty tough conversations with them.
Yes, I did. I mean, those tough conversations, Alan, usually were 15 minutes after the game, when they were sort of banging on my door. And we were resisting opening that door, so because that's what the advice we were getting. And I think Graham touches on a very similar subject, in that the whole approach was like a club, the FA, run in a fairly amateur way. All of them taking a salary or taking some part of money, but not actually doing the job that you expected. So I found it, coming from a business background, that sometimes you're thinking, what's going off here? I can remember going to London to one particular hearing where my report was pretty thorough, and I'm thinking, why is there an appeal? We got there, and it was about 5 minutes, of which the person involved was asked a question, and he went, well, maybe so, and that was sufficient to say, well, why have you appealed? There's no right of appeal, out you go. And I'm thinking, well, I've travelled all the way to London. This could have been resolved, this issue, with a degree of clarity, and either of us would have been better off. I think that, like Graham, when I first joined, when we talk about joining the Football League and how it operated, and now the FA operated and the Premier League, these were all small numbers. I can remember joining, my office at the Premier League had 25, there were 25 people in that organisation. And at the FA, they've grown in numbers. And whilst Graham says that they're giving commitment to those legal issues and how things are represented, I've no doubt they have, but they also commission a lot of outside lawyers in order to get over some of the issues that they face. But I have concerns, because I think that it's an organisation that operates from the centre, but it's lost a lot of its control because it's handed over to the county FAs. So that whole structure of the FA is all, for me, is lacking in professionalism, top to bottom. Yeah. And I think there were times when I saw, at the end of the day, when we talk about Sir Alex Ferguson, we're talking about one of the world's best managers, who was sparky, to say the very least. He was sparky. Away from the green bit, he was a gentleman, treated you with respect, listened to your sort of corner. But I saw him being treated, even from my side of the fence, very unprofessionally when it came to things like charges and all that goes. I can remember one particular incident where Sir Alex was going to get a rap across the knuckles, and I volunteered to go. I said, whoa, let me have a face-to-face. He'd made a comment against me, and he may have had some justification, because we were talking about a referee's performance. So we weren't a million miles apart. I've seen the referee better. And so the outcome was the FA were going to charge him. And I sort of intervened and said, look, I think the best thing to do here is for me to go and meet him and just have a face-to-face. And I remember going to Carrington, having a very good meeting with him and having a good discussion. And then I came out of the building, and I was going around these tight bends from Carrington, getting onto towards the M60, when the phone went. And the FA said, have you had your meeting? And I go, yes, I have. Oh, that's a pity. Why? Well, we're finding him 60 grand for something. And I'm thinking, well, that's really something that is no joined up thinking. And I'd been put in a melting pot on a relationship of a degree of respect, suddenly being cast as the devil because 60 grand is going to be paid. And these are the sort of things that happened whilst I was in that role.
Did you feel the backlash from Sir Alex personally over that?
I think Sir Alex had, as a public approach, and he has a private approach. And I think sometimes the two are very different. They are different. As I've said before, you know, when I retired from refereeing, and my last game was Manchester United versus Liverpool, I chose that game because of the intensity of the game. And I'm thinking, I'm coming out there. I upset the FA by doing that, by the way, because it wasn't at the end of the season. And I got a signed ball from Sir Alex. Why are you leaving? I've retired, and all that goes with it. And then some months later, a sort of pretty nice letter from him, which was really very courteous, very praiseworthy, and which I thought, well, that's really something that came as a surprise, that measured him. But he also had his hard side. If he thought a referee was not performing well, then he would have a real go.
Well, we had going to Graham. Thanks for that expansive answer there, Keith. We go to Graham. I mean, you got to know Sir Alex Ferguson particularly well. I mean, you were siding with him, whereas Keith was somewhat in the middle. And there was the Alan Wiley incident, which I know very well because I was heavily involved in reporting it in papers like the Daily Mail and the News of the World. And Graham, I recognised the headlines of some of the stories that I wrote in your book. How did you find the great man?
I find him really a really good man. As Keith said, he's got two sides to him. He's got his public persona, then he's got the side sort of behind closed doors. He's a very, very humorous man. He was a lot of character. But one thing that he said to me on the very first time we met was that he recognised that I was the expert on the rules. He would listen to what I had to say, and he was true to his word. And there were some times when I had to have difficult conversations with him about where he was sort of adamant that he didn't want to admit something, but I had to sort of say to him, look, you're not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. You need to sort of take it on the chin and move on from it. And as Keith sort of alluded to when he was speaking, some of the issues that he's talked about are actually sort of detailed in the book about sort of the comments that he made about Keith and the meeting that he talked about. But overall, in terms of sort of Alex's persona, from my perspective, I sort of enjoyed a very good sort of warm relationship with him. We could take sort of the mickey out of each other. There are one or two funny stories in the book about sort of our sort of interaction, and but the bottom line is he knew his stuff, and he got a memory that was unbelievable. He could sort of recall things from many sort of years ago, that would help me sort of in preparing his case. And so, as I say, in terms of sort of how he was, he was a great man to work with.
Did you ever feel personally a bit compromised, Graham? Did you ever take on a case where you perhaps disagreed with the cause that you were fighting for?
I think that it's a little bit like being a lawyer, that sort of there is a certain sort of threshold, and if a client comes to you and says, I want to deny this charge, you can only give him the advice that you believe is the best advice, and if he still wants to maintain that, then so you have to fight his corner. But there were certain sort of types of cases that I wouldn't get involved in. So, for example, I wouldn't get involved in anything sort of which related to child safeguarding or anything like that. It just wasn't sort of for me to deal with. I didn't have the expertise, but also it would have been something that I would have been very uncomfortable in dealing with. So I sort of stuck to what I knew best, which was sort of the stuff that I'd worked on at the FA.
Let me ask you this, because I've heard this quoted by many people, some journalists as well have said this to me, and I've found it true in my own experience. The more you look into football, the more you know about it, the less in love with the game you are.
Absolutely.
Is that all true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, sort of the, you know, to the football public, the fans, and the people that have an interest on the outside, you know, it's such a glamorous industry that everybody would love to be part of. But when you get on the inside, it's quite, as I say in the book, you know, it's quite a murky business, you know, shark infested waters. You're dealing with agents that, you know, want to do things in certain ways. You know, sort of, you know, clubs are, you know, overall generally sort of stick to the rules, but, you know, the characters that you come across in the game, you know, some are, shall we say, not as the type that you would want to sort of get involved with in your everyday day-to-day life. You know, I watch the game in a completely different way to what a fan would watch it.
Yeah, well, you're a Liverpool fan. You're from Barnsley, so you've obviously got a soft spot for Barnsley. Despite being a Liverpool fan, you found yourself working for the manager of Manchester United, but also the manager of Everton in the case of David Moyes. Keith, do you empathise with that comment? I mean, I came out with it. Graham endorsed it from his point of view, that you see things that you really, really don't want to see and hear in and around football. Is that true of you too?
I think I've been relatively fortunate, Alan, as a if you like, the policeman in the game. I think they tend not to talk to us, or we have got a job to do, and we tend to go in there, maybe naively, I don't know, but actually referee, and you want your referees to be the very best. My sort of approach was to, you know, when people used to say, oh, you shouldn't talk to the media at all, you shouldn't talk to the managers, leave them to do their job, you do yours. And at one time, they were very unhappy that I would actually visit a manager to have a discussion across the table, and a fairly open one at times. Yeah. But there are other occasions, and, you know, you've mentioned David Moyes, who's again, another guy that's got a fairly flash temperament. But I can remember I was trying to get the average number of yellow cards down. We were around about 5, Alan, averaging about 5 yellow cards a game. And I decided that what this was doing was increasing the number of red cards. And I wanted to reduce it all and improve the management and communication of players, of referees with players. And part of that was bringing a top-level sports psychologist and body language and communication skills, all those sort of things. And I can remember one of the blips was that Fellaini, that had come into Everton, had 10 yellow cards on the bounce. And on one occasion, David Moyes was jumping up and down, saying we got something in for his player and all that went with it. I examined the games in detail, Alan. I took several hours looking through the games and seeing that Fellaini was, in fact, being picked up for minor offences, relatively speaking, one of holding, preventing a promising attack, which was a mandatory yellow card. And so I can remember Farm Field had not been officially opened, but that's where I met David Moyes, Fellaini, and an interpreter. And we had 10 clips. And I sort of went to clip 2 and 3, whatever, and said, look, David, we got those wrong. This was the opening comment. Pardon? The referees have got this wrong. These are not cautionable offences. And I think he was taken aback. And then we ran through each one, and I'm saying, this is why it's a cautionable offence. This player has grabbed his opponent and stopped a promising attack. And what was interesting was that there was Moyes looking at it, having a really good conversation, when he suddenly realised he needed to change his player. He had Fellaini standing about a metre away, getting beat with pace, because this was a Belgium just coming into the Premier League, and he decided he got to be 2-3 meters off to give him more thinking time to prevent a yellow card. Now, for me, I thought that was a really positive discussion and debate. And of course, often pre-season, I brought in the system with the full approval of the Premier League that we met the managers pre-season so that they could probably openly discuss areas of their concern. And I could actually say, these are the new laws and these are how we're going to interpret them. But in reality, those people shaped refereeing in a positive manner. You know, somebody like Allardyce would say, look, you haven't got sufficient technical detail. You're working on perception, Keith. You've got to work on reality. And of course, when Sir Alex went publicly, had a go at Alan Wiley, Sir Alex made reference to his body shape, which was pear-shaped, in fairness, you can't deny, and the fact that I think he was trying to compare the athleticism of Alan Wiley against his players. And therefore, he suddenly got into sand because I was able to prove on a system that he was operating, Prozone, that Alan Wiley had in fact covered, he was about the third of the list of 22 players in that game. He was third in terms of distance covered and about fifth in terms of speed profile, 7 meters per second and all that goes with it. So,
well, do you know, Keith,
that got into the media. And of course, I think that was the start of Keith Hackett's long-term, long goodbye to the role of being boss of the Premier League. I've always felt that Manchester United's reaction to that, David Gill's letters into Scudamore, was probably one of the reasons why, okay, I was 65, got to that age, but could well have been one of the reasons behind me leaving and taking over another role at the Premier League.
A Manchester United vendetta. That's the first I've heard of that.
Well, I mean, I've no vendetta against them, but certainly the letter from David Gill was pretty hard hitting. But unlike the information, probably he wasn't privy to all the information I was. And I had all the pros and data, not only of Manchester United, but their opposition and my own match officials. So it was there factually, not from a perception point of view.
Interesting. And we haven't even mentioned VAR yet, but we will in part two. Keith, thanks very much. Graham, more on your book in particular. As a fan of Chesterfield, I quite like it when there's a couple of chunky chapters about my team in a book. But on this occasion, I wasn't so delighted. A pretty shameful episode in the history of that club. Fortunately, back on the straight and narrow now in every sense. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes, and do rejoin us with Keith Hackett and Graham Bean.